Hello and welcome inside the CBC Newsroom. I'm Arthi Pohl. We begin this hour with the latest on the deadly Air Canada plane crash at New York's LaGuardia Airport. And now, almost 36 hours later, we're beginning to learn more about the moments leading up to that crash. Passengers who were on the flight from Montreal to New York that collided with a fire truck on the tarmac say the pilot's decisive actions to brake hard and fast may have saved their lives.
Jolted forward, but immediately, maybe a second or two later, it felt like a crash. These two pilots who unfortunately lost their lives did everything in their power to stop the plane and slow it down at the very last minute when they saw the fire truck there. And
we landed very roughly. It was a rough landing. Like when we landed, everyone felt it. It just like the plane like jolted, and you heard the pilot try to brake, like he was trying to prevent the collision that occurred.
Tragically, both pilots, Antoine Forêt and Mackenzie Gunther, were killed in that crash. And miraculously, a flight attendant who was reportedly thrown 100 meters from the plane, about the length of a football field, survived. She was found still strapped in her seat. Now, her daughter says she's undergoing surgery for fractures, including a fractured leg. And the two Port Authority officers who were driving that fire truck also survived. Both are expected to recover from their injuries. And most of the more than 40 people sent to the hospital have been released. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board says it will provide an update this afternoon. In the meantime, they will continue to pore over the wreckage, as well as the plane's two black boxes, which have now been recovered. And earlier today, before heading into Cabinet, Canada's Transport Minister took some questions from reporters about the crash. We do know that Canada's Transportation Safety Board will be part of the investigative team. And Stephen McKinnon says Canada and the U.S. have an interconnected transportation network, as well as very healthy channels of communication.
Canadian transport systems, air, notably, has some of the most rigorous standards in the world, and I do want to be very reassuring that we take every precautionary measure and make sure that Canada continues to perform at the highest levels of security. The Americans have very high standards, and we have a very collaborative relationship with the U.S., and I know they'll be as eager as we to find the answers.
So the Minister of Transport speaking earlier today. Let's head over to the scene now. The CBC's Chris Reyes is back at LaGuardia Airport. She joins us now live. So Chris, we know that investigators are back there on the tarmac taking a look at the aircraft that remains on runway 4. Describe more for us what's happening today.
That's right. So that's the tarmac just over my shoulder. And in the distance, Arthi, you can see that aircraft, that Air Canada jet just frozen on the runway. From this vantage point, we don't see any investigators on the ground, and we didn't see them yet this morning, but they are expected to be on site. And presumably they are now working around the clock on this case, interviewing the surviving crew of this flight, as well as possibly some passengers. And then some of the work that they'll be doing here on the ground will likely be concentrated in and around that aircraft on that runway. And that is going to be meticulous work, in addition to getting through or going through that mangled mess for evidence. They have to make sure that their investigators are safe as they're doing that. So that is going to take a number of days. That's what we heard from the National Transportation Safety Board chair. This is what she had to say about the work that needs to happen in the next few days.
It's going to take some time. I just want to express how much there is a lot of debris. We need to go through all of that and to figure out what we need to take back to the NTSB, to our labs, what we might want to collect. First and foremost, what we need to take pictures of to document that evidence. That's all evidence. And we need to document that first. Then we need to collect some of that evidence. Then we get to that. It's going to be days.
And Arthi, to give you a sense of how difficult it is to try to get to some of the evidence in that aircraft yesterday in order to retrieve the flight data recorder as well as the cockpit voice recorder, two pieces of evidence that will be crucial to this investigation. They actually had to drill a hole in the roof of the aircraft to get to those devices. The good news is that they were able to get to it, send it to their labs in Washington, D.C., and they've confirmed that those devices are intact. And then we expect another update from the NTSB later this afternoon. We haven't heard from official sources since yesterday.
And of course, the recovery of those so-called black boxes will shed more light on the final communications, perhaps, with the pilots who lost their lives. Another piece of the investigation will be speaking with the passengers about that experience, about the terrifying landing. Many of them are calling the pilots heroes because of the actions that they believe were taken to prevent a greater impact. What are we hearing?
Exactly. We've been hearing from those passengers today about what they felt as this collision happened. A couple hours ago, Arthi, we were on the 7th floor of the parking garage overlooking the crash site, and it is quite an eerie sight to look at that frozen Air Canada aircraft, and you see that the mangled mess is concentrated at the front, at the nose of the plane. So that tells you that the brunt force of this collision was concentrated to the front. This plane didn't swerve, it didn't roll over, and passengers are crediting the pilots for activating those brakes so quickly and saving their lives. And in addition to that, we heard from New York City's Mayor Zohran Mamdani, who also credited passengers for helping each other to exit that plane in a way that was safe and was considerate to the well-being of the other passengers. Have a listen to what he said.
I also want to commend those who were thrust into a frightening accident and reacted not only with composure, but by extending a hand to the person next to them. Passengers who opened the emergency door and helped one another off the plane. People who kept one another calm.
And that's really the other story to this tragic crash, Arthi, the fact that you have so many stories of survival, in particular that flight attendant who was still fastened to her seat, ejected from the airplane and then found on the tarmac. And she has been able to share her survival story as well through her relative. And it's just amazing to hear these stories of people who survived, given, again, what happened to the pilots.
And of course, we know as a result of the crash and the ongoing investigation, there's been a lot of disruption at one of the busiest airports in the United States. Are there planes then taking off behind you there? We know that runway 4, for example, is kind of out of commission as that investigation continues.
That's right. So we've been seeing flights take off, which is something that we didn't see at all yesterday when this airport was shut down, Arthi, for the better part of the morning into the afternoon. In fact, I think the first flight that cleared to take off from LaGuardia yesterday was not until around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so now flights are taking off. I went to the departures area earlier this morning. It was full of passengers. And then on top of that, I looked at the departures board, which yesterday was entirely red with cancellations. Now there are flights that are taking off on time. And to give you some context about LaGuardia Airport, this is much smaller than JFK, which services a lot of international flights. Arthi, it only has 2 runways. So with that one runway out of commission, even though the airport is open, it's taking a while to get those flights out of here today and to deal with the backlog of yesterday's canceled flights. About 500 flights were canceled yesterday. So that would be 50% of the volume that typically takes off from LaGuardia Airport. Today, we know there are about 200 delays and then another 200 cancellations. So LaGuardia may be open, but it's not back to normal.
Okay, thanks for the latest on this, Chris. That is the CBC's Chris Reyes at LaGuardia Airport in New York.